All right, everybody, here's my review slash summary of my experience at Sleep No More in New York City. It was a little long in coming, but it took a while for me to gather my thoughts and formulate everything because the show really does stick with you in crazy, insane ways. It's like no other show experience I've ever seen. You can't, it is a show, but you can't really just call it a show because it's more of a experiential, choose your own adventure, wandering journey through this insanely realistic, site-specific theater. So, short summary of what Sleep No More is, and then I will break there because there will definitely be spoilers in my creepy. So, Ryder here is modeling the mask that all people in the excuse me, in the audience wear. The actors obviously do not wear these masks. That's how you know they're actors in the show. Everyone else in the show wears these masks, and so you go through the experience wearing this mask so that you can feel anonymous and yet you can still feel like you're a part of the show. It actually gives you a little bit more courage, a little more freedom to be able to be in this mask because nobody sees who you are or what's going on. So Sleep No More started in London by a company called Punch Drunk Theatre Company. It's a site-specific show. They took 5 warehouses in Chelsea and New York, 5 connected warehouse buildings, gutted them, went in and renovated and created the McKittrick Hotel, which is the setting for Sleep No More. Sleep No More is a new interpretation, new presentation of Shakespeare's Macbeth, and the Macbeth story, and all the elements that go along with that, but set in this crazy Stanley Kubrick style haunted house version of a hotel. It's never treated like a show. You arrive and you're at the doors of this hotel, standing outside waiting in line. And as you get in, they welcome you to the hotel. You know, welcome to the McKittrick Hotel. We hope you enjoy your stay, and you're treated as a guest. And so it's done like that. It's not presented to you. You never feel like you're an audience member, really. They give you a card when you get in. It's like a playing card, and it's this little card here. My card happens to be the 7 of Hearts. I thought at first that that was going to have something to do with the order in which they called you in groups to go into the actual hotel. But it didn't end up being that way. You walk in and you're in this very film noir 1930s, 40s-ish nightclub. And there's a black jazz singer up on the stage and a little 3-piece combo behind her. And people in the bar, I didn't know who these people were, whether they were people who had just gone through the hotel or whether they were people that I had walked in with, because they took about 40 of us from line outside the building into the hotel at a time. And I was walking in, I had my card, and I was looking around kind of, what should I do, what should I do? And as I wandered to the left, I immediately ran into the group that was getting on the elevator, and the host of the evening has a little martini glass, and he's, oh, yes, sir, are you joining us? And I'm like, yeah, I guess I am. Oh, I forgot though. Prior to getting to that bar, though, you walk in the front door and you instantly start walking through a narrow. You can touch the walls. Very haunted house, all black, nothing but a few candles every few feet or so to light the way. So it's totally pitch dark, and you're walking down this long, dark tunnel. As you're walking through that tunnel, you emerge and you're given your mask as you come through. You're given your mask to wear. You're given this. You don't put it on yet. You walk, but then all of a sudden you come out into that bar. And you're like, okay. So as I said, I got to the elevator, and they tell you everyone needs to put their masks on now. This might be where you want to stop watching, I guess, if you don't want any spoilers, because I'm going to kind of go through my experience now. Nevertheless, if you don't want spoilers, you need to go see Sleep No More. So you put your masks on, you get into the elevator, and they tell you, no talking. No one says any words at all from here. And he gives you a speech about when the McKittrick Hotel was built and how long the hotel has been there, and that it's seen all these famous guests and so forth, and just setting you up to really feel like you're, this elevator guy is taking you up, and you're hearing about the hotel, and you're going to go to your hotel room. The elevator stops, and they say, okay, everybody off. And one guy got off, and I was right behind him. I would have been the second guy off the elevator, but the elevator, but eventually he just holds his hand and he stops everybody else, and the doors close, and he says, from this point forward, there will be no more talking. And so everybody's silent, looking around, going, okay, that one guy just got off. Then the doors open, you go up to the top. There's 5 levels, 5 floors, and so I believe we went up all the way to the 5th level. When the elevator doors open and he says, you know, enjoy your stay. And you step out, and you're in your mask, and everybody's in their mask, there's no sounds, and you instantly step out and you hear the ambient music, because the entire hotel is, you know, it's 100 rooms. And when I say rooms, I don't mean just bedroom. I mean like one room could be an outdoor setting. One room could be a bathtub filled room. Anyway, well, you'll hear more about that, but you immediately have to make a choice because you don't know which way you want to go. And so most of the group went to the left, and so I decided, all right, I'm going to go to the right. And they told you right before you got off the elevator to remember that fortune favors the bold. And so I knew that you were able to walk up as close as you wanted to the actors, and sometimes the actors would interact with you and so forth. So I was determined to be bold in this situation. So I went to the right, and I heard some loud, climactic sort of sounding music that was happening in rooms to the left, but I figured I would try to just branch off for a little while and explore, because I knew that you can go through and you can open drawers and you can open books and you can explore and lift things and play with things and whatever you want to do. So as I'm wandering through, I went in a little room and opened a few books just to see what was going on, and I gradually made my way to what turned out to be a bar, and there was a lady in her 20s, an Asian woman, very slender, sort of wild hair, who I would later come to find out was one of the 3 witches in this incarnation of Macbeth, and she was on top of a bar, sort of gyrating wildly and as if she was possessed by some demon or something. And so there she was at the bar, and she would just, somehow she was sliding from one side of the bar and sliding to the other side of the bar, and she was laid out across it and gyrating, and her top was off, and she was just in this long flowy skirt. It was very ambiguous at first. At first I couldn't tell if it was a very feminine man or if it was just a very flat-chested woman Asian dancing. So it's also voyeuristic though, because you're in the mask and you're right there. I mean, literally, I was 2 feet from the bar. She's dancing in front of me, and so it's right there. And so she comes off the bar and she come through the crowd, and she's reaching at each of us. And I knew from going in, because my roommate Keith had seen the show, that you could just choose to follow. If you see an actor come by, you can follow them, and you can just go see what that actor's journey is, and you can follow that person and see what that experience is going to be like. So she went through the crowd, and a large portion of the people that were standing there watching this happen, which never seems to get crowded. I don't know how they manage the traffic in the hotel or what they do, but I never felt like I was really in a crowd, except for a few times on the stairwells and so forth. But a lot of people left and followed her. I stayed in the room in the bar, because I'd noticed that a young lady carrying a suitcase, looking very sort of lost and forlorn and lonely. There was a lady carrying a suitcase. She came in, and she was moving through the bar, and so I followed her. And in the far corner of the bar, there was an older middle-aged, maybe 40s, attractive, dark-haired, raven-like woman in a like a fortune teller sort of lady. And she was there at the bar, and she gave a very evil look to the young lady with the suitcase. So something was going on, but there was a story there. I never discovered what that story was, because I never really followed either one of those characters, but there was something going on there. So I walked up, and I was standing right next to the fortune teller lady, and the young lady with the suitcase walks up, and she has tears coming out of her eyes, and so she sets her suitcase down, and the fortune teller makes the lady sit down at a little table there, and so she sits down, and I'm standing right next to the table, and the fortune teller starts pouring drinks, and she pours in this whiskey, and she pours a drink for the young lady, and she pours a drink for herself. She makes the young lady drink it. The young lady drinks it. She dumps her drink out, pours another shot for the lady. She drinks hers. This goes on for a second. The girl with the suitcase is steadily crying and getting more and more upset. At this point, though, I didn't know whether I wanted to invest time in that story, and so I left while that was all sort of still going on. And that was a choice, like I said, it's choose your own adventure. So I really don't know where that suitcase girl's story ended up. I would see the fortune teller again later, but I would only briefly see the suitcase girl in a few more journeys. I left there, and then I ended up in a what looked like a hotel lobby. You know, the long check-in counter, and where would have been a bellhop sort of thing, and there was a guy in there, very disturbed looking, dark suit jacket, skinny black tie, hair disheveled, eyeliner on, very sort of emo looking, and he was in conversation with someone on the other side of the hotel stand, so the guy that was checking in, who also looked very rough, beard and short shaggy hair. They were sitting there looking at the guest list, and I walked right up to the emo looking fella, and he was looking down the line of the names. So I leaned right over next to him and was looking down the line with him. And he turns and he looks at me, eye to eye, and he reaches for my hand. And so I took his hand, and he led me away from the counter and took me to a little side stage area that was off past the little lobby area of the hotel. And he sat me down in a chair right in front of a little miniature stage. And he got up on stage and began to, after a while I realized that he was lip syncing what he was doing, but he was doing this old, very 30s song. I don't know who the artist is, but it's called "Is That All There Is?" And he was telling his life story about his father and being alone as a child, and and then gradually as time went on, he was, he's crying, and so his eye makeup is running down his face, and just very, very bizarre sort of one-on-one thing, because he was doing this show for me, even though there were about half a dozen other people standing around and watching. So I got up and I noticed this weird sort of guy with glasses, sort of an Victorian doctor, if you will. The small glasses and the nice suit, carrying a little case and an umbrella. And he looked interesting, and so I was like, I'm going to follow him. So I followed him, and as I was following him, the character who I knew was Macbeth in the show came walking by, and I knew this because I'd watched some preview footage, and so I knew who Macbeth was supposed to look like. He went walking by in a hurry with several people following him, but I didn't follow him. There's something about this spectacled guy made me want to follow him, and so I followed him. He opens a door and he goes out, and now we're outdoors, all still under the same roof, of course, but one of these rooms was sandy, dusty, dirt, and it was a cemetery, and so we're walking through this cemetery in the dirt, and so it's so differently tactile, and so I'm keeping up with this guy. I always wanted to be right next to the actors, and I managed to, the entire time that I was there, to never be more than a foot away from the action of whatever was going on. And so I follow this guy out into this graveyard, and there's thunder, and everything. Every room you go into has its own score, its own cinematic musicality to it everywhere you go, and so it's all syncopated and it's all timed, and then the actors begin choreography with the music. And so anyway, we're walking through the cemetery, and he gets to, and he arrives at a little gravestone, and so I walk around right to where, in the front of where he is, and he starts digging in the dirt, and he's digging in the dirt, and as he digs, he uncovers this handkerchief, and he unfolds it, and there's a bone in there. I'm not sure what kind of bone, but it's about this long, and it's a bone. What do I know? Bones. And it's raining. There's sound effects of rain, and so he hands his umbrella to another person in one of these, and so they're shielding him with the umbrella as he's ducked down digging in the dirt, and I'm ducked down right there next to him, and he takes another bone from his jacket, and he puts that in the handkerchief, and he folds them all together, and then he reburies the whole thing, and then he gets up and dusts himself off, and he walks away. And I didn't follow the guy with the umbrella at that point, because I was just, I don't know, at that point I was just feeling like I wanted to explore. I would catch little snatches of things here and there and see where I wanted to stay. So I made my way back. In attempting to find the new room, I ended up back in that hotel lobby room. And this time there was the Asian-looking witch, as well as another witchy femme fatale type, blonde, bobbed up hair, pinned, and that rough-looking bearded guy that I'd seen earlier. And they're sitting at the table having drinks. There's three of them. And they do this sort of choreographed thing where they leave one chair empty and they'll sit down and they'll drink. And then they'll get up and they'll move. And you never knew, because they would eyeball you eye to eye, very flirtatiously, very seductively, if they were about to hand you a drink or what was going to happen. So it was like they were teasing the audience, teasing. And then they got up and they all sprinted, they all ran out of there. And so then there were times when you would have to run to keep up with actors. And that was one of the times where the audience sort of split and everyone sort of flees and followed those various people. But I stayed because I saw Lady Macbeth come into the room from farther away, and very few people saw her, and so I shifted to follow her. And then she and Macbeth met in the hallway and they argued fiercely for about a minute, and they separated. At that point, I followed Macbeth, and I followed him down the steps, and I don't know whether we're on the second or third level at this point, but anyway, we ended up in a room, dirt floor, pool table, and very low, different shaped different shaped barricades along those other three walls here. It was him and who I decided must be Banquo, because there was this huge fight going on, and Macbeth and Banquo, who I decided that was Banquo, and was later affirmed that I think I was right, and they're fighting. Now when I say fighting, they were like Matrix style fighting. It was bend over and throw punches and flipping each other up onto the pool table. At one point, Macbeth slung Banquo over his shoulder, but Banquo landed against the wall, and so he sprinted up the wall and came back down. Very athletic combat. They circle back behind a low wall and go down, and Macbeth is pummeling him in the ground. You can't see that. And so that, I'm assuming, was when Macbeth killed Banquo. Macbeth gets up, and he's now bloody as he rises up from this fight, and he's bloody. And so he comes and he leaves, and I followed him out of that room. As he's walking up the hallway and I'm following him, he meets Lady Macbeth again. He's got the blood all over him. And she touches his hands, and she's touching her face and his face with the blood, and they sort of argue for a minute. But it's sensual. They meet in this room that has a bed in it. I don't know if it was supposed to be their bedroom or not. But they're arguing, and he's lifting her up, and it's very sexual and interpretive dance, but it's obviously an argument. I left after a few minutes of that and went to explore some more. I ended up in a room. It was what I thought was just another bar, but it had a sort of a dance floor. I went in, it was very disco music, do, 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 all this kind of music going on. And I saw the fortune teller lady again. This time sort of writhing and just writhing to this disco craziness. I look across the floor, and there on the other side of the room is the emo guy who I'd recognized, who pulled me aside earlier, who has now taken his shirt off and is barefoot and shirtless and is sexually dancing on the floor as well. So he climbs up on a table, and the fortune teller lady looks at him, and they start screaming, "Wah!" Screaming these wails. And so he jumps off the table and gets in the middle of the room. She's writhing against another table. So I climbed up on the table that Emo Boy was standing on so that I could get a better view of the middle of the room. When I looked in the middle of the room, the witches were also there, the Asian and the blonde witch, and there was a third who I never saw again until later on. There was the third witch who I assume was there. And now Emo Boy is completely naked and has put on a big goat, a ram's head. So he's nude completely with the goat head on. The three witches are in there. The fortune teller is writhing on this table back here. I'm standing on a table watching all this, and it's just disco craziness. So they're dancing around, sexually frolicking. It's like this frantic bacchanal orgy going on. And then one of the witches goes to a little container on the side of the stage, side of the room, and she lifts the lid. It's like one of those serving platters. She lifts the lid, and there's an infant baby in it. And they pull the infant baby out, and they walk over, and they're getting ready to sacrifice this baby. And it's all bloody, and it's crazy. And then all the lights go out. and then they come back on, and all the witches and Goat Boy are gone, and the room is just left sort of, oh my God, what the hell just happened? What was a naked goat man and a little baby and witches and an orgy and sacrifice and holy shit, what is this? So I decided to explore some more, and then that was when I discovered Lady Macbeth. So, you know, she's always freaking out in the show, you know, trying to wash the blood off her hands, wash the blood. So that was the scene that I encountered. She's walking through the hallway and she's muttering to herself about blood, 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 wringing her hands. And she goes into this room that is, it's like a dozen bathtubs just lined up. And it was like in this area of the hotel that very much resembled an insane asylum kind of place. So some of the hotels were, some of the bathtubs were empty. Some had like nastiness in them. Some were just brackish water. And there was one that was looked almost urine-ish. And so she's wringing her hands, and then this sort of really cute nurse, short brown, long brown hair done up, and then a little nurse hat. She comes in and she's helping Lady Macbeth undress. So mind you, I'm like 6 inches from Lady Macbeth, right? She goes to that urine-colored, water-filled bathtub, and completely naked. And she gets up on the side of the tub, once again like 5 inches from where I'm standing, totally naked, and she sinks down into the water. And she's rubbing the blood that's on her hands. And as she's rubbing her body and rubbing the blood like somehow all the water looks bloody now. And you know, it's like the more she rubs, the more blood is on her. So she stands up, and now she's wet and bloody and naked. And she steps out of the bathtub, and the nurse brings her a little robe, and she puts the robe on. And she leaves the room. So I followed the Lady Macbeth. She followed her right on her heels, and she goes into this boudoir. There's a pedestal in the middle in a clawfoot tub, surrounded by handwritten notes from Macbeth to Lady Macbeth, and these love notes and these crazy writings and things. And she's in there, and she's naked again, and she's Macbeth comes in, and they begin to frolic. He's still clothed, and she's naked. He leaves her, and she goes and she dances against this wall unit, and it's like these dressers and drawers that have been nailed and piled together to fill this entire wall, that they have now run up and down and danced up and down and sexually frolicked up and down. And she disappears behind one, and then she reappears, and you see that she's behind a piece of plexiglass or something. She's dancing against it and banging against it, and it looks like she's trying to escape, and it's nuts. And then she comes back around, and she goes back, and she has the robe on, and she goes back into the boudoir. And I left her at that point. I was like, okay, Lady Macbeth is really crazy. Let me go see what else is going on in this hotel. I ended up in a ballroom where all these characters that I'd seen earlier, the blonde-haired, the Asian emo boy, and a couple of people that I did not recognize at all. They're all in formal wear, gowns, and you know, flowy gowns, not ball gowns, but flowy evening. And they all are dancing about, and I didn't stay there very long, because I remember Keith telling me, hey, it all kind of ends in a big banquet room. And I was like, oh crap, I'm in the banquet room. Maybe I've missed the whole show and I'm here too early. So I didn't stay very long. But I stayed long enough to see that when all the characters left, the blonde, the lights start flickering, it goes kind of crazy, and she is thrashing about, and she's pulling at her hair, and eventually she pulls this blonde wig off, and now she's this bald-headed witch. And so for the rest of the time that I would see her, she would remain bald. As I passed her in the hallways and so forth and so on, and saw her later in the show, she was now the bald-haired white witch. I would later see a banquet in this same room where I had been following Macbeth and Lady Macbeth. And if been for this is a little out of sequence, I don't know. This is kind of it's all like that because you feel like you're inside somebody else's nightmare for the entire show. I had followed Lady Macbeth and Macbeth after one of their fornications in the room and with blood in the bathtub into the banquet room, and up on this table elevated were all the characters that you'd met, all the witches and several that I had no idea who they were because I don't think I never met some of these people. And I walked in center right below the table with Macbeth and Lady Macbeth, and here I am. And they break and they go and sit at the heads of the table. And then they're having a stop motion sort of time of the banquet. Everything is slow motion and passing this and flirting and guys kissing the girl to then turn around to make out with the guy and to touch each other in sexual ways. Banquo appears, bloody, and I'm assuming that it was the ghost of Banquo that appears in the play, and he sits at the table. And everything becomes a violent argument at that point. Still slow motion, but it's all a violent argument directed at Macbeth. Again, I felt like this might be the moment that the play was supposed to end, so I left before the climax of that. It all got dark, and I remember people had a chance to leave, and so I was like, I'm gonna go. Maybe I'll run into whatever this is again, which I did. But it was very sexy and very. There was also, and this is some other thoughts that I had that were just out of context, because I left there. I was violent. I saw the girl with the suitcase a few more times. There was also a pregnant lady walking around, very obviously pregnant lady, and I began to wonder at some point if I had followed that pregnant lady, would it have been that pregnant lady's baby who ended up in the goat guy orgy where they sacrificed the baby? You know, that was one thought that I had. I'd also heard that you can get caught up on these very one-on-one adventures, and I got caught up on one next. I'm walking along and still hadn't discovered half the rooms in the hotel, I know. But I turned the corner, and that nurse, the cute nurse that I had mentioned before, was sitting at a table all by herself, bent over a book. And so I walked in. There was nobody else around, just me and her. So I walk in, and she looks up and she sees me, and she kind of invites me into the room. So I go and I'm right next to her. I'm sitting, I crouch down where she's sitting, and she's looking at a page in a book that she'd torn out. And here's the page she had torn out of the book. She was in the process of cutting out this little maze on here, which I later would come to know. I've since mounted this on a piece of cardboard so it won't get destroyed, but she'd mounted this. Now she was looking over it. Here's a good sign of it. It's from a book called The Emergency Wife. Anyway, she was tracing it with her finger. She wanted to make sure that I was following her eyes as she traced the page here. She tapped at the bottom like this. And she looks up at me, and I look back at her, and she hands me the map. And I'm like, okay. And so she gets up and obviously wants me to follow her. So she leaves the room, and she comes and she goes through into another room that is now we're outdoors again. But it's like a maze of brambles and branches that you can see through, but you can't pass through. So it's literally a maze. But at the door, it's very much this wrought iron sort of cemetery gate that we can't get through. And so she stops and she turns to me as if to say, "Are you going to follow me?" And so I'm like, "Yeah, what else do I have to do tonight but follow you?" So she creeps through the gate. And I follow her through the gate. And as soon as I get through, she starts running, like sprinting. And obviously this is why she gave me the map. She's like, "Okay, dude, unless you get lost, or in case you get lost, here's a map, you can find your way." But I kept up with her. I'm like, I'm sprinting. We finally return, we zig, we zag, and we end up at this dead end, and there's a little hut. And she stops at the hut, like she's been called there somehow. And out of the hut comes this nurse dressed exactly like her, but with blonde hair. And they approach each other, and they're mirroring each other. They reach, and they're doing this type of thing, eye to eye, and then they bend down. And so I crouched down with them, and there was obviously a connection there. I couldn't figure out what the connection was. But then it was like they heard something, and they both got up, and they they ran in different directions. So I followed the brown-haired nurse. I followed her, and we ran again, and we ran back through the gate, but she lost me. She got into the hotel and she lost me. So I was like, well, that was cute, but that was short-lived. So anyway, I explored some more. Let's see. This is all the nurse stuff. I had to gather my thoughts, here on these things, these random thought post-it notes. So anyway, I wandered, and eventually I found the nurse again. I ended up back in that bathtub room, and she was now in there holding some blue fabric that she had soaked in the water of one of the tubs, and she was cradling it like a baby. So she's giggling and looking at me flirtatiously and holding this baby in her arms. And she comes and she hands me the baby, and I'm like, okay. I'm cradling it and whatever, and she laughs at me and she takes the baby and goes in another room. And so I follow her, and it's this room that has a big brown wooden butcher's table in it. And so she takes the baby, she's got it, and she's cradling it, and she starts laughing, and she holds it and bam, slams it on the table and starts scrubbing it, and laughing maniacally. And then she gets up and walks quickly into another room where there's clothes hanging from a line. And we go in there, and there's this music playing about some sort of weird love song of longing. And so she's there, and she's hanging the clothes on the line, and she hangs the baby on the line. But she's not just hanging them, she's going through and making body shapes out of all the clothes and clothespinning their hands so they're holding hands together. And she looks like she's gradually getting a little more and more crazy. So I leave, and I see Lady Macbeth and Macbeth again, and they're having this argument, and she's talking about the smell of blood, the smell of blood, the smell of blood. And so I kind of felt like I was seeing something that I'd seen before, sort of, because in essence, that's what the actors do. All 20 actors, so obviously you can never see this whole show unless you go every 20 times and follow one actor a night. The show itself is like an hour, and so they're on a loop, and they repeat their track every hour. So you're in there for almost 3 hours, so you have a chance of running into things more than once, or definitely getting things out of sequence. But they were going back to that ballroom, and so I was like, well, maybe I'll still have time to catch it again, because okay, this is the second time I've been in the ballroom with Macbeth and Lady Macbeth. So obviously the same thing's going to happen, and it did begin happening. So I left again, but at this point, it's been nearly 3 hours. It's been nearly 2.5 hours or so, and so you're there, and there are these people in black masks there to sort of make sure you don't go where you're not supposed to go, and by this point, they have begun blocking stairwells, and they're standing there. They won't let you pass certain things. So I'm like, oh, well, this must be the time when I'm supposed to be in that banquet room. So I'm making my way back to the banquet room. By the time I get back to the banquet room, and mind you that we're still all on the floor and everything, and I'm in the center of the room, and I walk in, and just about the time I see Macbeth hang by the neck in the center of the room. He's dangling, and the other characters fade away into the other rooms that you're not allowed to get to anymore. And so you're just there around with all your other fellow audience members in your white masks, staring up at Macbeth hanging from the ceiling by the neck, surrounded by all of you. Insane. So I did. So then you emerge, and you come back out of the hotel, and you reemerge into the nightclub, the jazz bar with the black singer and so forth. And so you're there wandering and just mind blown because you have no idea what you just experienced. Was it theater? Well, yes, it was. Was it improvis? I don't know what it was. Choose your own adventure madness of a Stanley Kubrickian, brilliant theatrically. Speechless. It was just crazy. So and there's no way. Like I said, you can never see the whole thing. When I got as I entered the bar again, it was interesting because I was there, and I had gone through at 7:30, so now it's about 10:30, and I look over here, and who should I see but the nurse, out of costume, hair down, standing against the bar. And I was so tempted, and I don't know what stopped me from going and saying, hey, weren't you the nurse? And thank you for that crazy, insane experience that just happened. But we made eye contact, and as soon as we made eye contact, she drifted across the bar and went to the other bar that was there. It was like a twofold thing, and she got a glass of water or something, and immediately went back over and stood next to this big security guard. So I was like, oh, maybe I'll just hang out here. So I didn't, who knows. But I kept wishing that I just wanted to go talk to her, and like, I don't know. It was so weird, but it was so weird that I had that one-on-one experience with that particular character that was so enveloping and personal, although it probably, was made so that it would have been anybody who stumbled along, but still it was my moment. And then to see her there in the bar in real life was very weird, very bizarre, very Twilight Zone. But as I said, you can't see everything. When I got back to the apartment, I talked to Keith about what I saw in the story of Macbeth. He said, I didn't see any of that. He was like, I never even got the story of Macbeth. You saw all of this, and I saw none of it. He said that he found a main street with shops and storefronts and a road you would walk up and down that was like, ran the length of, 50 yards or whatever. I didn't see any of that. He went through a library that had a secret passage into a morgue. I never saw that. And when he got into the morgue, there was a mortician working on a naked woman's body that he gradually began to touch more and more sexually until he got on top of her and began simulating sex with this naked body who they thought was supposed to be a dead body. Then she gasps and comes back to life, and you realize that it's a husband and wife playing this weird sexual role-playing game. Didn't see that. But it's just amazing. But it's just that you're in the middle of this. But I think things like The Nurse are set up on purpose to be kind of a diversion, if you will. They obviously want you to be able to come back and see this show time and time again. So they put these characters in there that will distract you from the story, that will take you on your own little personal, amazingly fully immersed journey. That's a one-on-one experience for you, but then you miss certain things and you don't have time to explore the rest of the hotel. And so you're like me, where you go, oh my God, I need to go back and see it 5 more times so I can experience the rest of this thing. There's also there's an urgency for you as a performer. I mean, as an actor, you feel like you have every bit, or if not more, urgency than the actors, which is interesting because as an audience member, you usually have all you're tasked to do is sit there and listen. Okay, watch and listen. Whereas this, you only discover as much as you can run around, follow, watch, learn, pick up clues, explore books, whatever you can make. And really, because you'll pick up books and it'll be, oh, this chapter is on magic and casting spells, and this is obviously where they burn their candles and cast spells, and every room, the detail is so meticulous that everything matters. Everything is part of the story and is a clue. So you want to get as much information as you can get in as short amount of time as possible. So you're constantly battling yourself. Who should I watch? Where should I go? What room do I do? It's like choose your own adventure on a grand scale. And at times you'll see multiple actors and you're like, who do I follow? And you'll be in a scene here and you'll be hearing something from another room and you go, should I go over there or not? But like I said, I had a really clear sense of the Macbeth story, whereas my roommate did not. But it's a totally individual experience. It's unlike anything. You can't. There's the hidden passages and doorways, and you can jump through windows in certain parts of the thing, like I did, and end up outside, and it's voyeuristic and crazy. It's discovery. It's discovery equal. The more you try to discover, the more you're rewarded. It really is true. There was a candy shop room. I wandered into there. I found a candy shop, an old rustic jars and latch type thing, and you can actually eat candy in there. And it wasn't manned by anyone, but it was just like this old abandoned candy room. When I had me a couple of root beer barrels. I mean, it's so sensation oriented and tactile, and it's almost. It's truly sensory overload. Sensory overload. It gets in your head. It's multi-terrain, it's multi-musical scores, It's amazing. It's dance. It's combat. It's erotic. It is scary. It's uncomfortable. It's full contact. It is anonymous. It's freedom. You really have to be brave, I think, to really achieve experiencing the full scope of Sleep No More. You have to be brave. You have to be not afraid to do what the audience, do what the performers want you to do, which is take part in the show. Even though they don't want you to feel like it's a show, ever. It's weird and crazy and wonderful and brilliant and one of a kind. And thank God Keith convinced me to extend my trip by a day so that I could see this, and that they added a show that night, because it's unlike anything. And if you have a chance to see it before it closes in September, it will stay with you longer here and here than anything that you can ever just see on stage, I think. Not because it's a beautiful story that is wonderful and glitzy and Broadway, but because of what it is that they have done and how much they get in your head and how much you experience. It's not just theater. I don't know what it is, but it was brilliant. Sleep No More, New York City. I don't know what else I can say. That was my experience, and I wish I could have it again about a dozen times.
I do too.
It's crazy and insane and wonderful. Go see it if you have a chance. Like, book tickets now. If you're going to New York before the end of September, you must go see it. If you can only afford to go see one thing and you're like, oh, but I really want to see Ghost, which is also brilliant, or Newsies, or Evita, or whatever it is you think you want to see, go see Sleep No More. You can always catch the show, those on tour, or go back to New York and see a Broadway show, because those are awesome too. But once in a lifetime, Sleep No More.